I know a ghost story. I don't remember everything perfectly, but I'll try my best. It's about this writer. I can't remember his name. This is a kind of urban legend. This is the kind of story you might hear sat around the campfire on a summer night. Anyway, this writer grew sick of the city, and he wanted to move somewhere else. He wanted to live life deep in the mountains, so he had a small wooden lodge built, and he moved out into the middle of nowhere. There was no electricity, gas, plumbing, or even a phone. There was just a fireplace. So, since the only heat source was a fireplace, the writer spoke with some people in the village at the foot of the mountain and found a married couple who sold charcoal on the side. He spoke with them and worked out a deal where he would get a delivery of charcoal once a week. He was living a good life out there in the mountains. He would plow fields, and when he felt like it, he would write. One peaceful night, he was awoken from his sleep by a strange noise. It was a kind of scratching sound. What the hell was that? With bleary eyes, he went in search of the sound. From here on, I will switch to the first person. There was light. There was a fire still burning in the fireplace, and I could see, albeit it was dark. The lodge wasn't exactly big, so it was easy to see your surroundings. Something stood out. There was something in front of one of the walls. It was just a simple wall made out of logs, and in front of that wall was the silhouette of a person. It was doing something. I couldn't quite make it out though. It looked like a very thin and slim silhouette. It was barely visible in the darkness. It was definitely human-like, and definitely there. I could only see from the back, but judging from its movements and the direction it was facing, I guessed that it was scratching the wall. It made sense because I could hear that scratching sound. I watched, and its movement continued. I don't know why, but I didn't care all that much. I just kind of fell asleep. Perhaps that was because I was really tired. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a laid-back guy. When I woke up in the morning, I went about my usual morning routine, and I almost didn't notice what was on the wall. Some messy scribbled letters were scrawled on the wall. It was hard to make out what they were, but on closer inspection, I realized that they said, "Kill," and "Help." The color of these letters was pitch black, and I presumed that they were made with charcoal. I looked at the floor, and there was powdered charcoal down there. I was really interested in this, and I wondered if the same phenomenon would happen again at night. When night fell, I made sure that my gas lanterns were lit in all four corners of the lodge, and there was plenty of logs on the fire. If that shadow appeared again, I was ready to take a closer look. I pretended to be asleep in bed, and I waited. I don't know how long I waited, but eventually I heard that scratching sound. I tried to leap out of bed, but I found that I couldn't move a muscle. Was this some kind of sleep paralysis? I guessed so because all I could do was move my eyes. So I looked towards the direction of the scratching sound. Unlike last night, the lodge was much brighter. However, the shadowy figure still looked like a complete dark silhouette. I had moved my bed that night, and this time I was looking at the shadow side on. It was definitely humanoid. It was writing on the wall. I looked at the thing's hand, and I couldn't see any charcoal in its grasp. It was using its finger to write. The moment I realized this, it stopped. It was like I had paused a scene in a movie. It didn't move a muscle. Then, its head slowly turned to face me. It was agonizing. I couldn't take it. I felt as if I was losing my mind. I couldn't turn away, and I couldn't close my eyes. I was about to see its face. It didn't have a face. It was like there was a black hole there. It was entirely featureless. The stench of spoiled and burnt meat attacked my nose, and that was when I realized what it was. It wasn't a shadow. It was a burnt person. I must have passed out. and when I came to in the morning there were more letters etched into the wooden walls which surrounded me. There was only one word this time, and that word was help. That was all I could stand in that lodge. I got dressed and I ran for the village at the bottom of the mountain. I needed to be around people. It felt like it took the longest time to get back to civilization. I went into the only bar they had there, and I ordered a drink. The barmaster asked me about the lodge, and if everything was okay, and I told him my tale, and I fully expected him to laugh at me, but he didn't. It was here that I heard an unexpected and terrifying story. The couple I had bought the charcoal from had been arrested. They had a daughter, and unbeknownst to the town, they had been punishing her physically. One day, it went too far, and the young high school student sadly passed away. Her parents burned her in an attempt to hide the evidence. They threw her body into a kiln. The daughter's high school teacher was concerned by her absence at school and had her own suspicions about her parents. The police got involved and discovered human remains in the kiln, and her parents were arrested. They confessed under police interrogation. I nearly threw up when something dawned on me. The charcoal that the couple had been delivering. It couldn't be, could it? The daughter's remains? I returned to the lodge after a few more drinks and collected all the remaining pieces of what I was told was charcoal and took them to a local temple to mourn for that girl's spirit. This happened about a year ago. I had a really cute girlfriend at the time. She was in her second year of university, and I noticed she didn't seem to have any female friends. I didn't hear any rumors about her, and I felt pretty lucky to have her as my girlfriend. I really tried my best to treat her right, and to take good care of her. My hometown was about an hour away from our university, and it became a bit of a pain to go back and forth from that place so regularly. I moved into a dorm after a while. She didn't go back to see her family because of the same reasons. They were far away. It turns out that she was just living with her mother back home. She invited me up to stay because she said that her mum would be away on a business trip. I was amazed by how clean their house was. My girlfriend cooked for me that night, and the smell of her food was so great. I started to feel a little nervous at her place. It was all so impressive. Her food was out of this world, so good. I slept in her bed that night. It was amazing. Then when I woke up in the morning, I realized that she was gone. I wondered if she got up out of the bed to sleep somewhere else, since it was pretty cramped in that single bed. I felt a little bit guilty about that. I went in search of her, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I mean, her mum's place wasn't that big. It was just an apartment with 3 other rooms. I thought that it would be a bit cheeky of me to go into her mum's room, so I didn't go there. Then I thought that perhaps she could have gone to a nearby convenience store to get some breakfast or something, but time crept on by, and when the clock told me it was noon, I knew that she hadn't just gone to the store. I think that I woke up at about 8 or 9 that morning, so that means that she was missing for at least 3 hours now. I went back to her room and realized that her cell phone was there, as well as her pajamas. I started to get a little worried now. Also, what would I do if her mother came back home? So I ended up thinking the best thing I could do in this situation would be to go home and wait for her call. I was confronted by another problem though. How could I lock the door? I would just have to leave it open, I guess. I thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that, just in case my girlfriend didn't have a key with her. The next day, on the way back from college, I decided to stop by and talk to a good friend of mine. He often let me stay over since he had a big place. For the sake of anonymity, I'll call this guy Y. Y had been my friend since elementary school. He had never had a girlfriend, but he would always help me with my relationship issues. It became kind of a ritual to go to his place and bring some booze if I was ever having troubles, and we would always talk it out. I'm not sure if he ever wanted to hear my troubles or if hearing it annoyed him or not, but nonetheless, that's what we did. I turned up with alcohol, and we started to talk about our usual day-to-day lives and what we did yesterday, etc. I then went on to what happened of the morning the last time I saw my girlfriend. I could see him listening, or was it pretending to listen? He had a look on his face that could only be described as mild interest. However, when I finished my story, I got to the point where she was gone, and I didn't know why. He shot up to his feet and got incredibly angry at me and said, "Why did you tell me that?" I felt really weird about this. He was standing there glaring at me like he was going to fight me. Seeing my friend like that with such anger on his face really startled me. He was literally shaking with either anger or fear. I couldn't decide. What the hell was up with this guy? I was wondering. I felt like I had to calm him down. Thinking back on it now, it feels like it was a miracle that he didn't fly off the handle and hit me. I spoke to him in a calm voice and asked him what made him so angry, to which he replied with gabbling apologies. He kept saying how sorry he was, but not explaining the reason for his anger. Then he said something like this. "Look, man, I'm really sorry. I'm a friend of yours, but yeah, I can't do it, man. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I know it's not nice to ask this, but I need you to go, man. Can you just leave?" He was literally pushing me out of the door. I was protesting and telling him how dumb this was and how unreasonable he was being, but he just kept saying sorry again and again. He pushed me to the door, and of course I wasn't fighting back because to me this wasn't a fight worth fighting. It was just confusing. He pushed me out of the door and slammed it shut, and I heard him lock it and throw the chain on. He never usually put the chain on. Since he pushed me out, I didn't even get a chance to put my shoes on. He always wanted me to take off my shoes. There I was, in my socks, and the ground was ice cold. Now it was my turn to get angry. I called his phone, but why didn't pick it up or come out? After several calls, I realized that he had turned it off. I started to kick his door with all my might, but kicking a door shoeless in the cold sucks. I gave up after a while, and I just went to McDonald's to get out of the cold. Something weird was going on. I decided to call my girlfriend. I sent her a couple of messages, and when she didn't respond, I tried calling her. I didn't get any response from her. It was really bad, and I was incredibly nervous for her. I spoke to people at university, teachers and acquaintances, and it seems like no one had seen her since the night that I stayed over at her place. I was too scared to go to the police because I could have been charged with her disappearance. I know it's terrible, but I didn't go to the police, and I live with that. This is where things got a little more weirder for me. I wasn't asked about her because she apparently had another boyfriend. One who met her mother, and I'm guessing that guy didn't know about me just like I didn't know about him. It seemed like he was the one who got asked about her whereabouts. This is almost the end of my story. I don't know what got my friend Y so angry, and that really scares me. He doesn't speak to me. Even when I saw him on campus, he ignored me like I didn't exist. I started to think he knew something about what happened to her that night or that morning. Shortly after this, Y went somewhere, and of course I have no idea where he went. I got an email from him that said, "Don't look for me." I'm really worried about my girlfriend. Y is hiding something. I know he is. I wish there was a proper ending to this, but it's all up in the air still. I lost my best friend and my girlfriend, and I'm terrified that the police are going to come knocking on my door soon. This happened when I was on a business trip a few years ago. I don't work for the same company anymore, but I was sent on a trip to Kyushu. After work, I went out alone to get some dinner and to have a couple of drinks. I found a nice little spot downtown, a little ways away from the hotel I was staying in. I used to end up eating and drinking alone quite a bit on these business trips, and I didn't mind that. So after I had my dinner and drinks, I decided to head back to the hotel. I wasn't drunk, just a bit tipsy, I guess. I hailed a taxi and hopped in, and after 2 to 3 minutes of riding in the taxi, I noticed something strange. The driver seemed to be whispering about something. At first I thought that he was talking to me, but then I realized he wasn't. It was pretty weird, so I just ended up ignoring him. After a while I became curious and decided to try and figure out what he was saying. But once I started listening to him, I realized that he was just mumbling some incomprehensible monologue. I remember a few phrases he said, which might help contextualize this story a bit. He said things like, "It's dangerous upstairs. If the battery runs out, just keep going straight." It probably made sense to him, but it didn't make sense to me. I wondered if the taxi driver was mentally ill or something. Not that it mattered, he was driving really well and I was happy with that. And we were pretty close to the hotel at this point. So despite being a little weirded out, I stayed in the taxi. I wondered if something weird was going to happen when I went to pay him for the ride, but he was completely normal. It was as if he was a different person when he was driving. I looked at him, and he looked at me for a moment. Then, when the door was shut, he pulled away slowly. That's when I saw it. Something that'll stay with me until the day I die. I saw someone in the taxi. I was looking through the taxi's windows, and I saw a middle-aged woman sat in the back of the taxi. She was sat in the seat directly behind the driver, and I had been sat on the other seat, next to her. I was alone in that car, I know I was. It was just the driver and I. She shouldn't or couldn't have been in there with me. She was wearing a suit. It looked like quite an old one, like it wasn't the fashion of the time. It would be like seeing someone wearing clothes from another era, like the 70s. I saw her face. It was absolutely expressionless. She was staring towards the driver. I almost instantly sobered up. I felt my skin turn cold and the onslaught of goosebumps. I was really freaked out that night. I slept with the lights on. And I didn't even want to take a shower. I didn't want to be any place where I was vulnerable. Nothing further happened that night, but I still have no idea what that was. But sometimes I wonder if that taxi driver is okay. My grandfather on my father's side told me a story about his hometown. Well, I guess an urban legend is a more appropriate phrase. Anyways, he comes from the countryside. Have you ever heard of yokai? They're kind of demon, fairy, or goblins out here in Japan. I'm sure that definitions will vary based on each case, and you might even consider these things cryptids, and you might not. Anyway, Japanese folklore is rich with yokai stories, and I want to tell you about the one my grandfather warned me about. Its name is Gossha. He told me if you don't listen properly, or you don't do as I say, then the Gossha will come and eat you. It's a good tactic, that. Well, I didn't grow up in the countryside, but every time I would visit my grandparents, I'd be a little older and a little smarter. Well, that's what I thought anyway. When I got to the right age, I challenged him on the whole Gossha thing. I asked him outright what it was. Well, Grandpa just ignored me and didn't explain it to me. So I went to ask my dad, and he told me. It's this creature that comes to take children in the night. We shouldn't talk about it, but legend has it that when it comes, it makes a terrible noise. Well, naturally, that scared the hell out of me, and my ears were pricked for every sound they could hear that night while I lay in bed. I wondered if I was just hearing things, but to me it sounded like I was hearing more than usual. I could hear this sound, which sounded like bicycle tires squeaking from below my window. It was like if you were riding a bike very slowly and applying the brakes as it slowed down. That's as best as I can describe it. Anyway, I tried to put this sound to the back of my mind. I thought that my mind might be playing tricks on me due to the story I heard. As much as I tried to ignore it, the sound persisted. I thought to myself, there's someone out there. When I went to look outside the window, I felt my granddad push me back down into bed. I didn't even hear him come in. He looked at me with a stern look, and even though no words were exchanged, I understood what he meant. Don't go near the window, and don't look out there. I heard that strange squeaking brake sound for 4 nights in a row after that. I needed the window open because it was midsummer. It was very distracting. These kinds of stories of monsters, yokais, and cryptids, however you want to categorize them, used to scare me when I was in elementary school. But as I got older, and as I realize now, I should have been more concerned that there was a prowler out there. You know, something human, a burglar, or a home invader. I spoke with the neighborhood kids. Some of them had heard these noises, and they didn't think it was some monster known as the Gossha outside. They, like me, thought that it could be a person. I was also told that the monster known as Gossha respected our national holiday, Obon, and it wouldn't be lurking out there. I know this is a pretty strange story, just stay with me though, as this is the premise. Obon is a festival here in Japan where the spirits return to our world, and it's a chance to pay respect to those spirits. We would always visit my grandfather in summer around Obon time. We didn't live with them. I think it was when I was in the 6th year of elementary school, our family decided to stay a little longer with my grandparents that summer, and I took part in Obon Odori. It was a festival, there was dancing and lanterns. Imagine those long summer nights as the backdrop for this story. The festival began outside the village hall. There was a kind of plaza there, and it was roomy and spacious. I remember thinking that it was a little late for us kids. I guessed that my parents didn't seem to mind, or they overlooked it. They were too busy enjoying themselves. When the sun set and darkness loomed around the town, I felt a little scared. The kids in the village had begun to shout, "Let's go to the mountain!" I didn't like it. I knew that a few years ago about this time of year a kid drowned in the reservoir out in those mountainous woods. It made me feel kind of nervous. I was always told it was off limits. All the neighbor kids were calling for us to go into the mountains as a dare, or as a test of our collective courage. It felt like I was the only one who didn't want to participate, so I joined in. It was a really bad idea though. However, our destination wasn't the mountain, but a shrine in the mountains. They said that there was this huge, tall torii gate, and everything beyond it was as dark as the night sky. The dare was to pass through that gate and to see what was on the other side. We kids headed up into the woods under the watchful eye of the mountain despite our family's warnings. Our ragtag group was of mixed age. I think the youngest was only in the 2nd year of elementary school. We were way out in the sticks now, and the distance between each streetlight grew larger with every step. To be completely honest with you, I wanted nothing more than to go home. It was around this point that some of the younger kids in our little tribe began to cry for their homes and mummies and daddies. I felt like joining them, to be honest, but I didn't. Some turned back and began the long, lonely walk of shame back to the village, but the bulk of us continued. Some of the other kids shouted at them to go home, and I joined them. I was feeling brave. Once these kids got shouted at in front of all the other kids, it pretty much guaranteed that no one else was going to complain and turn back, unless we would all turn back. I didn't realize how far away this shrine was. I was worried about how much trouble I would be in. I was sure that my parents would be angry. Then I heard something familiar and something disturbing. I heard the sound of a bicycle braking slowly. It sounded like it was coming from behind us. One kid muttered, "It's the Gossha!" Another kid started crying. One of the bigger kids grabbed the crying kid by the hand and started back towards the festival. we decided that we couldn't head towards that sound. There was something out here with us, and I, for one, wasn't going to risk testing if this monster was real or not. I could hear the distant drums of the festival below, and I felt tears well in my eyes. Hearing those drums was somehow comforting, and I didn't want to take any more steps towards the unknown. I didn't want to see the Gossha. I didn't want to be in the woods by the mountain. I arrived back at the plaza long after 10 p.m. All the parents were angry because they thought we had all gone home to bed. We didn't tell the parents about the sounds we heard out in the woods. There was an uproar when I woke up the next morning, and before I could rub the sleep from my eyes, my mother was asking me about a kid who was present in our little trip up to the shrine in the woods by the mountain. I was certain that he made it home. I was sure he must have made it back and slept in his own bedroom, just like I had. It turned out that I was wrong. There was already radio broadcasts asking for people to call in if they found a kid who matched his description. The whole area was being searched. Well, that kid wasn't found. And as the days marched on by, the rumors about the Gossha grew louder and louder. My family was part of the search party. We searched out there by the reservoir, but we couldn't find him. I stayed at my grandparents' that night, full of dread, and I heard that same squeaking bicycle braking sound that I had heard before, and I shuddered in bed. Well, we didn't go back to the countryside much after that trip. I think the next time our family headed back there was about 5 years after, for my grandfather's funeral. When we came back for the funeral, my relatives were all pleased to see me, and it was nice to be back. During the 5 years I had been away, the body of the missing kid had been discovered. Well, most of it. They couldn't account for one leg. News travels fast in small villages. People still said that they heard that breaking, squeaking sound from time to time, especially around the shrine. Some thought that it could have been the missing kid. Some thought that it could have been the Gossha. Others thought that there was no such monster, no such cryptid, just a disturbing and terrifying human capable of abducting naive children. Apparently there was a well-known pervert in the area about 5 years back. I was relieved to hear that no other kids went missing in my grandfather's countryside town. I just think that it's amazing that I'm still around these days. I guess some superstitions and warnings from days gone by aren't foolish, but helpful. They have their functions. Who knows though? Perhaps there is something that lives out in the woods, known as the Gossha.